folks, it's time for another horror review. This time we're going to talk about another movie that maybe people who have heard of, Hostel and Hostel 2, directed by Quentin Tarantino. Now, what can I think about this movie? Honestly, I have really never thought originally that this was probably more, not really scary, but actually pretty well kind of thrilling. It actually does really take place of the first movie, where we have a group of basically young students who constantly, basically mainly go to a road trip, and basically they go to Europe, basically going to spend the time basically, get hammered and mainly just try to have a good time. Until one of basically the exchange students, basically from, of course, in Europe, basically take the three students and actually have the most terrible and most retributive of their contemplative journey of all time. So my thought was based of the film itself. It's quite as a kind of like more as a hustle kind of flick horror genre, because a lot of horror movies I have never basically seen. And like if you look at Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's sort of like that, Richard, but in a very different basic takes in Europe way. It takes in based in Spain. But this movie is actually pretty not as basically scary as I thought it was. I mean, it is kind of terrifying and perverting and even suspense thriller, Richard, when you watch it. But to my extent, I never find this movie very well threatening or very well just like horrifying, Richard. But it does have some suspense moments. Like, of course, we have the three students who are trying to, of course, basically get this up for to have a good time, getting laid and everything else, and then all of a sudden they just basically only made this die, Richard, from it. But one character, I think what was his name? Darren Richard Simpson, who actually basically was one of the three main students who survived of the first movie, and actually died, basically, of course, the spoilers, died in the second. So yeah, that's pretty well sensitive there is of that. But my intention of the first movie was kind of like, okay, showing the three students basically because travel versus visit in Europe, and then you of course have the two distinct students from Europe, of course, and they take them basically in some alleys and basically some basically places that are not supposed to belong, because at the end of the movie you do feel like usually there's actually a little bit more good ending, Richard. But there's actually two cuts based on this set, Richard. Here, you have the director's cut, that you have the third character, Traveler, who basically unmanagedly just unfairly kills the actual killer's daughter, which explains why that Richard, well, in some ways, Richard, for more on here, you do get, of course, the director's cut, Richard, both versions based on this Blu-ray set. And this, of course, is a Mill Creek set, Richard. It's actually a two-disc set, basically with two spread movies for one disc, which I'll show you, Richard, a little bit later. And the only thing about those two cuts is that you have one, basically the extended edition, where you have him and basically with the daughter basically in the train, and then you have the director's cut that you have, of course, straightforward, basically having the original survivor character who actually just kills both the daughter and basically biological father. So that's pretty well considered right there. Of course, in part two, we have a little bit of like different between the first. Now, part two, it's more kind of like a survivor game in part two, and I think that's what's kind of driven to me, because when I was watching it, I was kind of thinking, really? They having a bet contest to see who is basically going to be killed first? I mean, it starts off based a little bit like, okay, of course you have the main person who's trying to basically kill all these victims, and they go to their trip, and then you have the main purpose character who survives, and that was really kind of like drew me a little bit kind of like odd in a very opposite way. Because in the second, it's like very well just like the same. The only difference is, virtually, you have a betting contest. It's like a bet website that they were trying to basically who got the most preferred to basically much money to, of course, kill, which was kind of driven to me because this was, of course, starring Heather Mavison, if I pronounce the name right. But and of course Laurie Griffinman, that originally are basically started in this movie, because those two main principal female characters, start to become friends and have a little bit of bonding with one another, and it's not as great as the first. I mean, the first was kind of really driven because you do see the premise of the students, three main travel students, who are basically going on a trip and actually uneventually kill them and actually getting killed. In the second, it's like the same, but the only difference is you got female characters in the basically the second, and you have, of course, the two male characters who are very well business people, and they're trying to, of course, basically have the first time to slaughter the characters, basically in the second, which is quite really this kind of tense. And basically, to my sense, I thought the second was kind of really creepy in a way, and very well not really considered for whatsoever. So that was basically, of course, the review. Now you probably wonder what's inside in this wonderful Mill Creek set that they did to make these two movies possible. Well, let's take a closer look, shall we? Okay, so of course this is the Mill Creek set that actually put out basically, I think, right before the end of summer. And you got the two main movies on the front, and of course you do have the nice version of the object that basically shows basically, and on the back, if we flip around, we do have the basically of course the interface of how much of the information of the movie itself, and of course you have that version there. But also, not only that, you do have, what was it? There got to be something I just basically could show you. You do have a bonus content basically of the director's cut, which is quite nice. And of course, basically for this is actually a Mill Creek set. There's actually, well, the only reason why this is basically a low budget movie is because it wasn't getting that much ratings, which I heard from, of course, Rotten Tomato. But it actually really became a very well considered film, Richard, to me. So that's pretty much set. And if we open it up, we have, of course, the two main movies on one disc, which is pretty nice, and it's not in an equal casing. It's actually a standalone, basically, Blu-ray casing, when it has a little snap-on based on the spine, which I actually took it out for some reason. And then on the spine, we have the listing of the two movies, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, and there you go. So that's, of course, Hostel and Hostel Part 2. I have to say, this movie is quite really interesting if you want to pick it up. I actually got this picture for, of course, for about $5 or so at Walmart. And you can easily get these recently Mill Creek sets for dirt cheap, and they actually are easy to buy. And of course, that's not much of I can say about it. Definitely worth recommending for this movie. It's pretty much a very well, more as like kind of like a rough ride, kind of like trip horror genre. And I have to say, definitely worth picking up. So that is ending it for many of you now of my horror reviews. But there's still plenty more. So until next time, this is Sarah Brown. Thank you for watching, and sayonara.